Hi everybody, it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL, and about a year ago I put out a full review of the Cintiq 27QHD non-touch version sitting right behind me over here. However, since then I have clocked in at least 1,000 plus hours teaching full-time and working full-time, and I've learned a lot about the device. Okay, so I thought for any of you who are interested in buying the machine or interested in just knowing more about the machine you already bought, you already own, to give you my kind of follow-up after the honeymoon review of it and let you know what I've learned about it and what makes it a good machine or a not good machine. All right, so we'll see how I feel about it. Stay tuned for that. Secondly, I also picked up the first generation Cintiq Companion. Being the first of 3 generations of companions, because we have the Wacom Mobile Studio Pro that was just released, I'm not going to do a review of it. That would be outdated and pointless, but I will give you my opinions on the differences between a mobile drawing tablet like the Cintiq or a desktop, because a lot of people have misconceptions on why to buy one of these things. They end up not getting any use out of it, and it ends up on Craigslist. And if you don't believe me, go on Craigslist. You'll see a lot of them out there, especially the hybrids, of course, right? So I'm going to give you a bit of a comparison so you'll know if it's worth buying, and if you're torn between getting a desktop or a mobile device, how to decide. Okay, because it's not going to be a hard decision if you know how these things work. Last but not least, for any of you who are less tech savvy and don't necessarily know what kind of hardware and specs you need to power a Cintiq 27QHD, I'm going to give you a little virtual build. I'm not going to teach you how to build a computer itself. Okay, there's plenty of videos online that'll teach you how to do that. But what I'll give you is all of the different hardware you're going to need to slap together and what kind of stuff to look for if you bought a pre-built computer, so that you can power a 27QHD optimally without doing an overkill build and spending money that you don't need to. All right, so I'm not going to bore you anymore with this big, long, stretched out intro. Let's get to it. All right, so to get started, let's have a look at this Cintiq 27QHD non-touch version a year after the fact. Like I said, I've clocked in thousands of hours teaching and working full-time on it, and I've learned a lot about the product, and I have a very clear idea and an opinion of the product. So I bet the first question you want to know, the first answer you want to know from me is, how do I feel about it a year after the fact, after I've put this much time into it? And the answer is a definitive, I still love it as much today as I did when I first bought it. In fact, I think we might have developed a bit of a codependency, unfortunately. I think it's gone a little overboard. Not to mean that I couldn't work on another device. I could easily work on an Intuos or a smaller Cintiq or whatever the case might be. But you get used to working a certain way, and which I'll describe in a minute. Okay? So moving on to another device, any other device for that matter, I would feel the pinch. I definitely would. It's, of course, doable, but I would feel it. With that said, a lot of people approach me when they're asking me about this product. How do I use it? More specifically, they approach me and say, what's it like working big? Implying that I zoom in and I look at my artwork this close up. Wow, look at that eye, it's huge. 99.99% of the time, you're never going to work that way. Any experienced artist, traditional or digital, will tell you that you usually work smaller rather than bigger, because you want to make sure that you're looking at the whole image. You make sure you're looking at the big picture. So your values, your colors, your composition needs to be well balanced. If you're zoomed in all the time, you get caught up in detail, it's time consuming, and you might end up with worse results. So most of the time, you're not going to use this to full screen your image. So how do you use this? What makes this worthwhile? And the answer is, think about it like a workshop or a kitchen counter or a stage. Imagine you're cooking something, or imagine you're building a piece of furniture. Sure, you can work on a small counter space. You can do it. Sure, you can build furniture in a little closet. It can be done. But when you have that extra space, it's creatively and productively liberating. It's freeing experience to have that space to work on. Okay? Imagine you're putting together a dance choreography and you've got 10 dancers crammed in on one little stage. It's claustrophobic. But when you have the space, you can move things around and you have a lot more space to think and create. I love space for that matter. Whenever I would work in a sketchbook, when I still do work in a sketchbook on the once every 16 years and actually do that, I like working on big sketchbooks. I never cared for those tiny little Da Vinci sketchbooks. I always found them very annoying, little pencil sketchy things. Okay, so that's generally how I'm going to do it. So I kind of slapped together a little bit of a virtual makeshift work setup. Now I'm right-handed, so I have the glove on my right hand. This is the Hue one, by the way. Yeah, $7 or $8 Canadian on Amazon. Okay, it's the first one I ever bought. I only got one more, and I've stitched this one since. You can see the little red stitching in the middle. Okay, I love this. We go way back. It's like a pair of dance shoes. I love it. Just to give you an idea, this is generally the size at most that generally is the size that I'm going to be working. Over to the left are my image references, and I have a lot of space for my image references. If I want to use up a little space, I can bring up I very often have my brush presets on the left side over here. I have my menus on the right side. I can bring more menus into this. I can bring in adjustment windows and stuff like that. No problem, and I got plenty of space to work. Would I ever want to buy a bigger one? No, I don't think it would be necessary. I would just give me more space for image references, and that's kind of overkill at that point. It doesn't justify the cost. I really love this size. I'm very comfortable working this size. It's perfect for me, and I have zero complaints as far as that's concerned whatsoever. So the next question you might have is the Express Remote. Okay. Last year in my review, if you haven't checked it out, again, you can go and check out my full review on it, where I give you all my settings for my Express Remote as well. I haven't changed anything since then. I still use it exactly the same way I do. But do I use it fully? Do I use it every day? Yes, I do use it every day, but I don't use 75% of the buttons on this thing, although it's set up to do so. There's only 3 buttons that I actually use on it. Zooming in and zooming out. So if we got the right image here, like this. So just scaling my window up and down. I use this button, and I use the other button for flipping my canvas horizontal. That's it. Everything else, honestly, there's no point on me to move my hand away from a keyboard that I've trained myself on for 20 plus years in Photoshop to move on to retrain myself on the Express Remote. However, on the odd occasion when I do want to stand up and take the weight off of my legs or take the weight off my back, because you can get back pains if you sit for too long. I've gotten that a lot, okay? I like to stand up and put this in a standing position. Again, I mentioned this last year. If you like to work standing, check out the Ergotron or Ergotech. They have a lot of very good arms in this. VESA arm mounts and all that and monitor mounts have become a very mainstream thing. So there's lots of choices out there, and the prices have dropped considerably. So go and check that out. And I know that on QBrush, you can go and check out QBrush, and he's got a whole good review of the Ergotron mount as well. So you can check that out. I got the Ergo Stand from Wacom, and I'm glad I did personally, because you can put your weight on it. You're not worried about it moving around too much. Plus, I've got a glass desk. So if I put if I hooked up a mount to this desk, I would end up cracking it. So 99% of the time, I only use 2 buttons here. Now, I'm going to mention a few technical things about this. They're not major, but they're very important to mention. And I hope this message trickles its way all the way to Wacom, because this is a message, this seems to be a recurring trend, and it's getting worse and worse and worse as far as that's concerned. Like I said, nothing major. Last year when I first did the review, I had a gripe about the fact that Wacom did not include the Ergo Stand with the device the way they did with the 24. They sold it as a few $100s extra to purchase, as an accessory, so to speak, when it's very clear that you cannot use this device over any length of time without a stand of any kind, Ergotron or Ergo Stand. Okay? And that pissed me off, because that's when you're spending thousands of dollars on a device like this, my personal opinion, it should be included. Now, since then, I've noticed a few little other things, and I'm going to be mentioning them as we move forward. But the major thing I would mention about this is, when I bought my BenQ gaming monitor, okay, gaming art production, okay, my BenQ, it's the XR3501, came out of the box almost perfectly calibrated. The only thing you needed to adjust was one little point on the reds and bring the brightness down. Good to go. You can do photo correction, photo editing on my BenQ out of the box. Okay. This you do not. And I remember the first time I realized this, I was working on one of my cards, and I finished it and it looked great on the screen, and then I opened it up on my iPhone and I went, ooh, that looks gross. The blacks were all off, the reds were all off, all the saturations were wrong. It was really, really off. Did I run to the Wacom store online and purchase their color calibrator? Absolutely not. And this is the point I want to make. A device that's designed for artists, that costs thousands of dollars. I find it insulting, and I find it bad marketing. The sales department, it shows the greed of their sales department that they would not calibrate something like this out of the box so they could make a couple of $100 off of a calibrator. I don't get it. This device is designed for that, and the fact that it's not calibrated is a deliberate act. The fact that I can take an image on this screen and move it over on the other screen and get a completely different looking image, that's not cool, right? And it's penny pinching as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely penny pinching. BenQ could do that on their gaming monitor. They're perfectly capable of doing this here. So that's why I wouldn't. And if I would buy a color calibrator, I wouldn't buy it from Wacom, just to prove a point. Furthermore, if any of you listening, if you're listening and you can find anywhere online the calibration settings posted on any site whatsoever for the Cintiq 27QHD, please link it in the comments below, because I have looked far and wide and could not find a thing. My BenQ, go to Tom's Hardware, there it is. I also tried out the Asus XR3501and, same idea. Went online, found the calibration settings, plugged them in, and I was good to go. The Cintiq, the only thing you're going to find are marketing pages for their calibrator. Okay? It's almost like they have people out there controlling the content. Of course, I don't want to sound paranoid, but it really sure does feel that way when you can't find those settings anywhere to be found. And it really does desperately need it. So how did I calibrate it? Well, I'm an artist. I teach my students and I train myself in calibrating and seeing colors with your own eyes, training your eyes to see color properly, right? So I got my iPhone, I held it up next to the thing, and I fixed the reds, the blues, the greens, whatever case, one color at a time, and adjusted it until I couldn't really tell the difference between my iPhone display and my Cintiq display. From my client's perspective, from my perspective, from the naked eye, you can't really see the difference. You would really honestly need a calibrator to be able to see the difference between the two. But what I did is I opened up my settings, I changed everything so that it matched, and then I wrote down notes on the settings, so anytime I needed to reset or whatever the case might be, I could just punch in those same settings and I was good to go. Okay, so that's just a little something. Now the final thing I'm going to say about the 27QHD, and this is actually I got a message from a friend of mine on Facebook just yesterday who's in a little bit of a panic because he recently purchased the 27QHD, and he noticed that every time he powered it on, there was about a 20-second period where the color seemed a little bit blue-green, especially noticeable in the grays. And then it would be fine after that. And he said, oh my God, is there something wrong with my display? Do I have to return it? Okay. And I told him, no, you don't have to. It was the same thing with me. Since I bought it, it's always done that. Remember, it's a pen display, and it's not just a simple monitor. So it takes about 10-20 seconds for it to warm, for all of the different RGB lighting to warm up, for them to work at full capacity. So at the beginning, it might seem a little bit blue-green, but that lasts about 10-20 seconds, then you should be good to go. If it stays that way, confided you haven't badly calibrated your monitor, if it stays that way, you might have an issue. You might need to call Wacom, but otherwise you should be perfectly cool. All right. So that's it for the 27QHD, my follow-up on it. Okay. Now let's do a comparison between mobile and desktop. Next, let's look at the Cintiq Companion that we got over here. The first question you might be asking me is, do I use it regularly? And the answer is absolutely yes. I do use it regularly. But again, just like the Cintiq 27QHD, not for the reasons you might think. And it's important to mention this because a lot of people buy a Cintiq Companion or a mobile drawing device, drawing tablet, thinking they're going to be using it for certain reasons. They don't end up doing it, and then they end up on Craigslist. And that comes at the cost of hundreds of dollars out of your pocket when you're selling something secondhand. So it's not really cool, right? So how do I use this? Well, I teach full-time, I work full-time, I'm always on the road, I'm always doing things. For me, it's what I use when I gotta get up and go, okay? It's also what I use as an alternative desktop solution when I'm not working from home. If my internet's not working, if they're doing construction on the building, if I'm out traveling or whatever the case might be, and I still need to continue to work, that's when I grab this. And in that particular sense, in that particular case, this has been an absolute lifesaver for me. However, how do I not use it And this is so important for you guys to hear. A lot of people think you're going to grab it, you're going to go drawing when you're sitting on your couch and watching TV, or you're going to go get up every day and you're going to go to the cafe to, get fresh air and mingle with people. Well, no, you're not. Because if you have a better solution, if you have a more practical solution, a larger surface with all of the bells and whistles and all that kind of stuff handy, then you're not going to jump to your companion. The only reason you'd end up using this is if you're using a device that's perhaps less practical, like if you're working on an Intuos or working on something else, a smaller device, in which case this would be great, right? But if you've got a Cintiq or you've got something like this, or you've got a nice ultra-wide monitor and you're working like that on your desktop setup, chances are this is going to be sitting around collecting dust. And I see this happen time and time again. If you want to get a Cintiq Companion 1, go online and you can get one probably for around $1,000 Canadian, of course. It's going to be less for that if you're paying in US dollars. But just remember that important fact, and don't go out running to the bank running out to the store buying it because you think you're going to be hanging out and smoking beaties and drinking your lattes and flirting with people. It doesn't work that way. Okay, you're just not going to be able to will yourself to get out of the house every day to use it for the sake of getting out to use it. Okay. Now, another important question, and this actually relates to the Cintiq 27QHD Touch as well. A, do I miss not having the touch feature on the 27QHD? And do I ever use the touch feature on my mobile device? As far as the 27QHD is concerned, I never even thought about it. In fact, nothing against if people are using it and they get a lot of use out of it and they purchase the touch version, totally cool. But you're paying a hefty premium for a feature that I feel I would never bother using on a desktop device. However, on a mobile device, you'd be surprised how often you need it. Okay, what do I mean by this? Well, it's another one of those cafe misconceptions that people have. You think you're going to go and you're going to set yourself up in a cafe, you're going to stick it on your lap and you're going to use your keyboard or whatever, and there you go. That's not always possible because when you're in a cafe, remember that your seating is set up for the convenience of people that are sitting around chatting, not necessarily working, so to speak. So unless you're sitting it on a stand in front of you, and unless you have it set up, your table set up in a way that, for instance, if you're right-handed, your keyboard's to the left of you, then you can't use the keyboard, right? If you purchase one of these, which, by the way, I personally feel it's a necessity. You really should get one of these. I originally used it for my 27QHD, but now I use it exclusively for this because I've got a replacement keyboard for it now. I have an official keyboard. But there are often situations where you won't be able to use a keyboard. Another situation is where, for instance, you're sitting on a sofa chair because there's no tables left, and what are you going to do? You're going to balance it on the arm of the sofa chair? Of course not, right? So in that particular case, you have your two alternatives to keyboard shortcuts. You have all your express keys over here, and you've got two on-screen menus that you can apply as well. And I end up using that quite a bit when I can. Now, take note, it will slow down your productivity a little bit. I'd say about 50%, okay? Because when you're working on a keyboard and you're working on a large device like this, you're going to be much snappier. You have access to all these keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. If you don't have access to that, it will slow you down a little bit, but you can do it. You might, in certain circumstances as well, need to use the Photoshop menu. I know how absolutely primitive that sounds, but you will. That's the situation if you don't have access to a keyboard. All right. Now, here's the big question. If I had to choose between a smaller mobile device, such as the Cintiq Companion 1, the Companion 2, or now the new Wacom Mobile Studio Pro, or a desktop Cintiq, a larger desktop, which one would I spend my money on first? Which one do I feel I would get more use out of it? Which one would be more worth my money? And it's a no-brainer for me. I would absolutely get this. Okay. Now, when I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but when I first bought my Cintiq, I was really torn between the two because I'm thinking, well, they're both about the same price, so they probably both have equal value. No, this is more valuable, much more valuable to me. I get much more use out of this, and if I would not use this on a daily basis. If I had an Intuos, I would probably use an Intuos with a large screen rather than use this. This is really only convenient for getting out of the house when you need to. Okay. And, you know, even with the Cintiq Companion one that only has two USB outputs, it's USB 3.0s. Okay. Even though it's only got two, and I don't think, yeah, it's only got two. Webcam, headset, you're good to go. In a case where you don't need a headset, then you end up, what I would do is I would do webcam and the Bluetooth is, actually, this is Bluetooth. I do that in my mouse dongle, because I picked up a little mouse like this for about 20 bucks at Costco. Okay, 20 bucks Canadian again. So that's how I would set myself up on this. But I would definitely buy this before I buy one of these. Why? Because like I said earlier, to me, you have the creative freedom, you have the convenience of working on a large surface. You can spread yourself out, okay? Where on this, you can't. I mean, look, if I can do a little, if you can see it in the video, let me take this off the stand for a sec. It's about 1/4 the screen real estate. If I line up the actual monitors, it's about 1/4 the screen real estate. It's a significant difference. Now, the other question you might ask is the stand a necessity? Yes, it absolutely is. If you're getting out of the house and you need to keep your hands free and you want to work with the keyboard, you're not going to balance it on your knees and do it like this. Even when you put it on your knees, sometimes you have to set it at one of the lower settings so that it's perpendicular to your point of view. So you're going to need the stand. Is it the prettiest thing in the world? No, it's not the prettiest thing in the world. It's cardboard and plasticky, but it's solid. It's got 3 different sizes and it doesn't wobble and your Cintiq does not slide. You can lean up against it and draw and you're good to go. There's absolutely no problem with this. Now this is another little gripe about Wacom. The new Wacom Mobile Studio Pro does not come packaged, does not come in the box with a stand. Why? Who made the decision that who has the audacity to sell a 3,000 plus, again Canadian, right? $3,000+ device and not throw in a $5 stand? Because that's how much it probably cost them to manufacture these things. Even if it cost them 50 bucks. What, it's 3,550, right? I mean, come on. It's just dumb. It uses the same stand, but now you have to buy it separately as an accessory. I don't get that, because there's no way you can use that out in public without having the convenience of having a stand with you. It doesn't mean you can't use it on your lap, but the majority of the time, you're probably going to be using the stand with it. I'm just saying it, okay? So do take that into account. The last question is, would I, if I needed to, upgrade to a newer model of Cintiq that's currently on the market? Would I pick up the Cintiq Companion 2, or would I pick up the Cintiq, or at least the Wacom Mobile Studio Pro? Would I buy one of those? As I mentioned earlier, the only convenience of one of these is the ability to get out of the house. As far as the screen real estate, the resolution, the color representation, the pen sensitivity, the responsiveness, it's perfect. I have no complaints on this. I don't need anything more to draw. So the only real reason why I would ever upgrade to a new one would be to get one that was significantly larger. Now the new Wacom Mobile Studio Pro can go up to 15 inches, I think. This is 13. So you get the 13 and the 15 inch. 13, 15. That's not significant. That's not worth an extra 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 bucks in my opinion. When the only convenience you're going to have is the mobility. Okay? I would, however, consider upgrading if they made a significantly larger one. Like I'd say like 21 plus inches. Then I'd start thinking about it, because then you have a nice large real estate, and that could be a valid desktop solution, a replacement idea for a desktop. But at a 13 inch or even 15 or even 17 inch or even 19 for that matter, I don't consider it a valid desktop replacement. Okay? So buy it for the right reasons. Buy it because you're somebody who's on the road a lot and still has to work when they're on the road. But if that's not the case, if you're somebody who's usually at home and you only want to buy it because you want to schmooze in cafes, you're wasting your money. Get yourself a desktop instead. All right? All right. Last but not least, I am on Amazon.com. So that means this is the American site. And this reflects American prices. If you're from Canada, go to Amazon.ca. If you're from the UK or Africa, you want to go to your corresponding Amazon retailer, okay, just to make sure that you're getting the right prices for depending on the region that you're from. With that said, I've got a virtual makeshift build of a computer right here that contains, in most part, the specs and the hardware that you're going to need to power to power a 27QHD and a second monitor if you need it, and even do some decent gaming on it, because that comes with the package basically, without breaking the bank. So this is a real budget value type of build you've got right here. Now, like I said, I'm not a professional when it comes to building computers or anything like that, but this should get you going. If you want to go and find out how to build a computer from scratch, you can go to Tom's Hardware, Jay's 2 Cents, NCIX, Hardware Canucks, that kind of thing. There's lots of YouTube channels out there that we can help you out with that kind of stuff. Okay? So, who can benefit from this? Number one, you've got a pre-built computer and you want to upgrade it. B, you want to build a computer from scratch. And C, you want to buy a new pre-built computer. In any one of these situations, I'll have you covered. All right. So let's have a look. The first thing you're going to need is your case. In this particular case, I've got the Corsair Carbide 100R mid-tower case. There's small, medium, and large. My personal recommendation is to get a mid-tower case. Why? Because when you get a smaller case, when you bring in other different devices into it, it's going to be a nightmare of wiring, and that can damage other components. It can interfere with your cooling system and your fans, and you can cause overheating. And it's just an overall unpleasant experience. It costs you about $20 more tops. You get yourself a really nice sized case. If you actually rewind to the beginning of this video, you're going to notice sitting on my kid's table off in the back, I just got today in the mail the Corsair 600C. So I'm very excited to get that all set up. Next, once you've got your case, you've got your power supply. You need a battery to power all of this stuff, basically. In this particular case, notice that it's a 500 watt power supply. If you only want to do some light gaming with a modest graphic card, not overly modest, but a decent graphic card, and you don't need too much power, 450 to 500 watts, you're good to go. I personally always like to give myself a tiny little bit of overhead just in case. In your particular case, if you're not doing any hardcore gaming on it, 500 watts, you're good to go. Okay? Notice as well that the lettering is silver. You can get bronze, you can get silver, you can get gold, or you can get platinum, I think, as well. I'm not sure. That talks about the signal integrity of the actual voltage integrity. I wouldn't really worry about that. My personal, I have a pretty serious gaming build, and I'm on the 750 B2. Okay, so which is a bronze power supply. So you should be perfectly good with the bronze if you want to save yourself a little bit of money, do a little shopping around. Okay, you got your case, you got your power supply. Now you need something to plug stuff into. So that's where your motherboard comes in. That's kind of like the main central hub where everything's going to be plugged in. So here, there's a few bits of information I want to point out to you that are important. Number one, DDR3. This relates to the type of memory. DDR3 has been around for years. It's very common and it's much less expensive. It's not the next gen overclock, super duper power, extreme gamer type of DDR memory. This is the slightly older, standard, good to go, much cheaper. Notice as well that this is a micro ATX. There's ATX, there's micro ATX, etc. Micro means it's a smaller form factor, so it can fit into smaller cases. This does not mean that it's less powerful. You can get micro ATX and micro ATX, and they're just as powerful. ATX refers to the standard larger size. Okay. The other thing you want to make sure is that it's you want to verify. In this particular case, you notice it's Intel. This means that the processor and all that kind of stuff that you're going to be plugging into needs to be Intel compatible. Okay, so Intel, micro ATX, DDR3, that's what you're really looking for. There's a lot of other specs going on and stuff like that, but you don't really need to worry about that for the meantime. And notice that it's only $62. Okay, it's pretty cheap, believe you me. You can get a lot more expensive than that. Once you got that, you need a brain, and that's your processor. In these brains, they have different compartments. They're referred to as cores. All right. You can also refer to, by the way, I'll be referring it to as a CPU. CPU means Central Processing Unit. Okay. So just so you know, I'm not trying to be a douche and elitist and throw terms at you that sound like I'm trying to show off here. This is an Intel Core i5. What does that mean? Well, there's i3, there's i5, and there's i7 currently. There might be more later on. Okay. But those are the three main ones. If you've got an older computer, you don't even have any of those three. It's something else. Okay? But i3, i5, and i7, what do you need? If you're doing word processing, watching YouTube videos, surfing Facebook, you get an i3. If you want to do anything that requires graphics of any time, and that does include most gaming, most high-end gaming and all that kind of stuff as well, you get an i5, okay? Then there's an i7. Why would you get an i7? The only reason you get one is A, you render lots of YouTube videos. You're doing videos every single day, like it's something you do on a daily basis and you need something that will be a little snappier and faster. You get an i7. If you work in 3D a lot, i7. But remember, it's not a value for you if you do it once in a while. It's a value for you if you do it every day, if this is your main way you work. Otherwise, you're overkilling it and you're paying a premium for something you don't need to. So Intel Core processor i5. The other thing I want to mention just to watch out for is, notice that it's an i5 661 blank. Okay? It's not a, for instance, a 6550K. When it's got a little K, that is next gen, that is much more expensive. Don't fall victim to that because you're going to buy a processor that's not only too powerful but too expensive, right? So just watch out for that as well, because it's something that's easy to miss. The next and probably most important thing that any person who works with graphics is going to need, and this applies to gamers and this applies to artists who work on Cintiqs and stuff like that, is your video card, also referred to as your GPU. Okay, your graphic processing unit. Your GPU is what powers any types of intensive graphics, be it digital raster graphics on a pen display like this, or vector graphics, or 3D graphics, or any kind of things like that. Okay. In this particular case, notice that this is a 1050. That's just, there's many. There's the 950, the 1050, the 1070, the 1080, all these different brands, okay? In this particular case, it's a 1050. This might even be a little bit overkill. For the last year, I was working on an Asus GTX 950 overclock OC edition, and I was flying through this thing. It was plenty sufficient for the Cintiq, for the 27QHD, and I could do some decent gaming with that as well. Witcher 3 at 1920 by 1080 on high settings, a really nice smooth frame rate. It was great. So the 1050, I don't know if it's a little bit better or worse. I can't remember, but it's comparable probably to the 950. Do your homework and make little comparisons, and but this should be plenty sufficient. It's only $120. Take a note of something. Your GPU and your CPU are going to be the most expensive things that you're going to be putting into your computer. Okay, if you can get those for a good price, you pretty much guarantee that everything else on your system is going to be, you're going to get a good deal for your price, provided you don't buy anything, you don't overpay on anything else. Okay, so this should do you well, but look for deals, look for things, but just be careful not to get those really bottom line crappy little graphics cards, because you won't be able to do squat on them. Take note of that. Okay, so it's worth investing in a low-end, mid-range, decent graphic card, because this is something you're going to need a lot. After that, your memory, your RAM. In this case, remember, DDR3 motherboard, DDR3 RAM. It has to be compatible. If you've got a DDR4 motherboard, you can't put DDR3 RAM. Okay? It starts to get complicated. So DDR3 goes with DDR3, DDR4 goes with DDR4, and DDR3 is much less expensive. How much RAM do you need? My personal opinion is that sweet spot is 16 gigs of RAM. If you go over that, the price won't necessarily justify the performance increase. Less than that, for certain programs like Corel Painter, Photoshop not so much, but Corel Painter, and are RAM demanding programs. So you want to make sure you have at least 16 gigs. The other important thing is most motherboards use dual channel RAM, which means you have to install two at the same time to get the best performance from them. So instead of buying one 16 gig stick of RAM, it's better to buy two 8s. You're going to get better performance from that, okay? That's why they very often sell them in pairs. So buy yourself two sticks, this is 2 times 4 gig. So this is actually 8 gig altogether. Okay, so we're going to have to look for another one. You're going to want to look for 2 times 8 gigs. It'll probably cost you a little bit more, but not too much more. This is $50, maybe clocking about 60 or 70. That should cover the cost. Last but not least, we have 2 options for hard drives. If you're on a budget, you want to get the best bang for your buck, and you're not overly concerned about hyper fast performance, get yourself a hard disk drive or an HDD. Okay? A hard drive has been around for years, and there's advantages to it. Number one, it's much less expensive to get a ton more memory. The other advantage is that you can read and write on it. It doesn't have any expiration date, so to speak. You can keep on pumping more and more, read, write, erasing, all that kind of stuff. Yes, eventually it'll wear out, but it's got much better life expectancy than other types of newer technology. But it is slower. So the alternative to this is to get a solid state drive or an SSD. This is the exact model that I've got in my system right now. It's the Samsung 850 EVO 500 gig. All right. If you're not going to be saving tons of pictures, tons of videos, all that kind of stuff, then you only need one of these. In my particular case, I only use this for my programs and my games. I install all my programs and games. All of my stuff that I save on Dropbox. I save them all remotely because reinstalling my operating system, having a backup is all stuff that really matters to me because I run an online school. So I've got tons of students' work that I have to keep track of, right? If my computer hard drive crashed or my SSD crashed on me, I would be in very big trouble. So would hundreds of other people. So I got to make sure my stuff is safe. In which case, all of my local programs, the ones I use frequently, and my operating system are all installed onto my SSD. And I have also a hard drive with 2 terabytes of space where I save any extra temporary files, save files, video files, any kinds of stuff like that I only need temporarily, that I don't necessarily need to back up just yet. And that gets saved onto my hard drive. In your particular case, if you want to choose between one or the other, I recommend, if you want to go budget and still have perfectly tolerable performance, get yourself a hard drive, $69 for 2 terabytes. If you want to get a little bit more performance, then in this particular case, you'd be paying a lot more. 500 gigs, which is a quarter of the space, for almost triple the price. But it's much faster. Like, to boot up my computer on a hard drive would take me about 3.5 to 4 minutes. On an SSD takes me about 20 seconds. To open up Photoshop would take me about 40, 50 seconds to open up Photoshop. On an SSD, about 4 seconds. Everything just snappy and fast. Okay? That, all in all, ladies and gentlemen, is an overview of the type of build or the type of upgrades that you'll need to make for yourself. Hopefully this helps out. I hope that I covered everything. If you have any questions or comments on this particular build, let me know. Okay? Or if you have any suggestions because you're a little bit more tech savvy than myself, please let me know in the comments below.
Hi, everybody. I'm just talking about stuff.
I hope you enjoyed my review.
I hope you're gonna enjoy my review.
Well, I hope you did enjoy my review.
I hope you did enjoy my review.
And if you have any suggestions, let us know in the comments below.
If you have any suggestions, let us know below.
In the comments below.
In the comments below.
And don't forget about my mentorship, LucidPIXUL.
And don't forget about my mentorship, LucidPIXUL.
And the Brush Sauce Theater art contest. That's gonna
be the Brush Out Theater contest.
Brush Out Theater. Good. Well done. You nailed it. And I think that's it.
And I just have one more thing that my dad won't know what I want to say, because everything I've been saying all along, he's been telling me what to do. Well, I just wanted to say that I hope it was a great video and you loved it, what I just said, that my daddy has been secreting me all along. So I hope you like it. So I hope you
Don't click anything.
I hope you had a good time.